I think Johnston is a real standout character in The Last Emperor. So he's not in the movie from the beginning. He's somebody who's hired by the court at some point in Puyi's childhood. We meet him and he's hired as a tutor, which did happen in real life. And of course, he wrote an account of his time in China and the Forbidden City in the book Twilight in the Forbidden City. So, why is Johnston such a standout character to me? And what do I think his role is in the movie? Well, he's a friend. I think that's what it is. He's one of the only friends that Puyi has in the first half of his life. He has his brother, who it seems like he doesn't get to see too much. But mostly he's surrounded by these adults, the ladies of the court, the eunuchs, the guards. That's a lot of his childhood. He doesn't go to school. He doesn't play with other kids. So in a lot of ways, he hasn't had a conventional childhood. And he's born as the Emperor of China. So that's really unconventional. And he's working from a young age in a way. He's a politician. He was pretty much a politician since he's 3 years old. So he's playing the game of politics, and people are playing the game of politics around him. Johnston is into the picture in his childhood, and he comments right away that the emperor is very lonely. He leads a very lonely life. And he's played by, in the movie, Peter O'Toole, fantastic actor, one of the great actors of the 20th century. And I think it's purposely done that there's compassion in Johnston's character. I sense a sense of compassion for the position that Puyi is in. And it's genuine, too. He wants to help him. Now, as I said before in other videos, the real story is a little more complicated because Johnston was in some ways a political figure himself. You can read about it. There's more to Johnston's story, and there possibly was some political intrigue in his story as well. That's debatable to some extent. But Johnston, he was a scholar as well, and if you have ever read Twilight in the Forbidden City, and I did, and I recommend it, he dedicated the book to Puyi. So as for the real story, it's a little more nuanced. It's maybe he's not, and we can't idealize him as much as in the movie. Although there is a part in the movie where they hint at Johnston's greater role, where he says that the British embassy will give Puyi a place. They'll give him lodging after he's kicked out of the Forbidden City. So it does hint at that. Anyway, I think I really just enjoy this character because I think whatever the case of what he was or what he's hinted at, there is real compassion, and he becomes like a friend, a mentor in all this that's going on. We have the backdrop of China in like a perpetual chaos throughout this part of its history, and it's only going to get worse, and it's only going to get crazier for Puyi as the years go by. And we have the scheming going on, the negotiations going on, and Puyi growing up where he doesn't even know if he's going to be killed, if he's going to be poisoned. He's still such an important person. He's a player in Chinese politics. And Johnston is like this benefactor to him. He's looking out for him. And he's somebody who's actually trying to help him, not as an emperor, as a political figure, but as a friend in a lot of ways. So we have the situation where Puyi's eyesight is failing, and Johnston wants him to get glasses. And this is such a controversial topic in the Forbidden City, where the court is saying the emperor can't have any glasses. But Johnston's saying he needs them. He needs to be able to see, like anybody whose eyesight is failing would need to be able to see. But they're saying, well, the emperor, he's like a infallible person, and he shouldn't have to have glasses. How can this living God have glasses? But is that really what the controversy is? Is it really about him being able to... Is it really about him being infallible, or is it that maybe he's more useful to the court if he has limited vision? I think there's a little more to it than what the court is saying. Because as we know, as Puyi confides in Johnston, they're always telling him what to say. People are always trying to control him, even though on paper he can tell them what to do all the time, anytime. Because it's kind of seen, as I've mentioned in my other videos, Puyi is not an aggressive person. He's not a very confident person. So even though he has this power, the court has found ways to manipulate him to get him to actually be subservient in a lot of ways, even though he has absolute power over them. So Johnston actually, he advocates for Puyi getting glasses, and he wins in this situation. And then there's the time where he decides to get married. And Johnston plays also a mentor role in this. And this is the point where Puyi, he really gets to that like the precipice in his life where he's starting to be more emboldened. He's starting to make more decisions. And I really think if you watch Johnston's roles in this, he gets Puyi to that point in his life. He helps him get there because he didn't have anybody like that before. And all it looks like before Johnston's arrival is that Puyi is being put more and more under the thumb of the court and the eunuchs and the intrigue of what's going on. He is being... There's always this push where the court or the politics, the actors going on see him more useful as a pawn in China and in the court than as an actual emperor, as an actual person who's making his own decisions. So Johnston gets him to this point where he's now choosing his wife. He's choosing the consort. He has glasses. He's better able to see what's going on around him. He's not the same boy who just has a mouse in his pocket and that's his only friend before Johnston's arrival. So there's a lot of there's really this, it's kind of a sad point where Puyi he's grown, he's more of an adult now. He's maybe in his late teens. He's making decisions. He gets married. There's a greater confidence in his character. He decides he wants something more from his life. And that's about the time where there's the crucial event. He's in the movie, he's playing tennis. Johnston's refereeing the game. He's playing tennis with his wife and the consort. And then all of a sudden, now there's the big event where this some warlord comes in and says, well, now he has 24 hours to leave the Forbidden City. So this is a real catalyst for what's going on right now. So this is kind of like a make it or break it part in Puyi's life. Which way is he going to go? He still resonates with the Chinese public as the last emperor of China. He was born as when he was 3, he was coronated as the actual emperor of China, the same as it was for thousands of years. He was reduced somewhat to a figurehead later on in his childhood, but he was still the emperor in the Forbidden City. Johnston helped navigate him through his late childhood and teen years, helped be like a buffer from the machinations of the court. He gets married, he has an empress, he has a consort, he has this greater confidence. He wants to rule. He wants to be an important person in China. Now he's being kicked out. He can't do anything about that. This warlord's come in, he's come in with an army, and he has 24 hours to evacuate. So that's what happens. He has to make a decision now. Where is he going to go? What is he going to do? It's that crucial moment. And so Johnston advises him, you can seek refuge at the British embassy, because of course we know he was not just a tutor. He had connections to the British government, which was an imperial power at that time. So there is that moment where they leave, and it's a touching moment where Johnston shakes his hand and says, well, let's leave as we started. And it's touching because Johnston arrived in Puyi's childhood shaking his hand as a friend in a gesture of goodwill and understanding. And it was awkward because I suppose shaking hands was not part of Chinese culture, and the Emperor Puyi, he doesn't really know how to do it, and it's kind of funny and weird, and they leave shaking hands that same way. They Johnston arrives as a friend, as a mentor, somebody who helped him, and they leave on good terms like this. And that's the end of Johnston's role in the movie. And he leaves off at this point. But as we know, Puyi, he heads off to the international city, Tianjin, where there's these different countries involved in this place. And that's really where he can make that decision now. And he makes the decision. Ultimately, he's in Tianjin, and you get the feeling there's people from different countries there or different players in Chinese politics who have different things to offer him based on his still having this status as the Emperor of China, and with China's fate undecided in the 20th century. So what role is Puyi going to play, not just in his own, not just what is he going to do as a person for his own life, but it's unresolved what role he's going to play in China. Because, of course, we know now that the communists, the nationalists and the communists ultimately took power, but this was not evident at this time yet. It's kind of like there's different places that China can go in this century. It's always been, for thousands of years, a country. It's been a part of world politics since the Roman times, all through the Middle Ages. So, and we have, for example, like even in Asia, you had Japan rose as a great power. So there's this real time there where, for all we know, he could have played a greater role, and Puyi could be a household name for everybody, like Mao is now. But sadly, it didn't happen that way. That it went terribly wrong at this time, because Puyi, as we mentioned, he had these ambitions, these greater ambitions in politics, but he didn't go with the British, and who knows how that could have ended for him. I'm not going to say it would have been better, but ultimately he does not take Johnston's advice, and he does not go with the British, who would later be the victors in World War II. He decides to grow closer to the Japanese. And this is seen through the interactions with Mr. Amikazu, who's some kind of Japanese liaison at that time in China. And this is ultimately what they offer Puyi, is to be the emperor again. And I can see how this would be enticing for somebody like him. That's what they're offering him. You can't be the emperor of all of China right now, but we will make you the emperor of Manchuria, a province of China, which is where Puyi's ancestry is. So there's some legitimacy there. So it's not, looking back on it, it looks like a terrible decision, because if you know about history, you know that the Japanese really wanted to be the power in China, and it looks like, and they considered themselves superior to the Chinese, almost in the same way that the Germans were trying to fulfill this similar destiny in Europe, where they wanted to take over a lot of Europe as this great power. But at the time, maybe this wasn't so obvious, and they're offering him to restore himself as the emperor of a province of China, and maybe Puyi felt at some point he could once again be the emperor of China. And maybe there's something to it where Puyi, he loses that conscience that Johnston was, that person in his corner, that mentor, that person who's going to tell him what's really going on and going to help him stand up for himself. Because he does have his wife, the Empress. She sees what's going on. She sees Mr. Amikazu doesn't have good intentions, that the Japanese overall don't have good intentions. She sees this from the beginning. So she is there as somebody who's trying to help him, similar to what Johnston was. She doesn't seem to have any backdoor agenda, and she seems to want to keep the Japanese away from him. So I can say that about the Empress. I don't know. We don't know, of course, but he did have that person with the Empress. But he doesn't take her advice. And he grows closer to the Japanese. There's this weird thing with his cousin who's a spy and stuff going on with her. And the movie gets very dark at this point, and where from Tianjin, where he's kind of this young man partying and people want to be his friend, and he's singing, and it's kind of like the Roaring 20s. It gets very dark when we get to the 1930s, and the role of the Japanese becomes more obvious. And of course, it's told later that the Japanese just really take over and they're doing horrible things. And Mr. Amikazu is no Johnston. He wants to help the Japanese empire, and he seems to become the real power in Manchuria. And it becomes very tragic at that point. And it's only later when Puyi goes through his redemption in prison, where the warden of the prison becomes another benefactor in his life, becomes another true friend, that Puyi redeems himself and gets his confidence back and is able to get over the guilt of being a person who had power. He restored himself as an emperor, yet allowed in some ways what happened in Manchuria to happen and played a role in it. So it's really, I'm fascinated by these characters. I'm fascinated by Johnston, and maybe I'll do a whole video about the warden too, because he plays a similar role in the second half of the movie, and it's a very interesting role. And even though these characters are not there throughout, I think there's a lot to say about them. So so you guys listening to this, tell me what you think about Johnston, and if you have other ideas about him, just contribute to a conversation. So that's my take on it. And let's not forget the Empress too, that she was in his corner, it seems. And of course what happened to her was very tragic. So if you like this, hit the like so we can continue to share and talk about this great movie with other people. And that's it for now. Have a great day.